Chapter 3. The Manifesto. The auditorium was full. Elias stood in the wings, watching the crowd filter in. They were mostly young, mostly earnest, mostly the kind of people who wore black turtlenecks and carried leather-bound notebooks, and spoke in the urgent, slightly breathless tones of those who had recently discovered that the world was broken, and that they, and they alone, had the solution. He had been one of them once. He had stood in the wings of other auditoriums waiting to hear other philosophers, other prophets, other men who claimed to have found the truth. He had been young and earnest and certain, and he had believed with all his heart that the world could be saved. Now he was 42 years old, and he was the one on the stage, and he was no longer certain of anything. He adjusted his tie. He smoothed his hair. He checked his notes, though he had memorized them weeks ago. He was nervous. He was always nervous before a lecture, even after all these years. The nervousness was a habit, a ritual, a way of reminding himself that the stakes were real. He had spent his entire life honing this argument, refining it, sharpening it until it could cut through any objection. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, this audience, this chance to change minds. And now the moment was here, and he was terrified. He took a deep breath. He stepped onto the stage. The applause was polite. It was the applause of an audience that was waiting to be impressed, waiting to be convinced, waiting to have their assumptions confirmed. He had seen this before. He had seen it in lecture halls across the world, in cities from Berlin to Buenos Aires, in universities and conference centers and rented auditoriums like this one. The audience was always the same. They wanted to believe. They wanted to be told that their suffering had meaning, that their pain was part of some larger plan, that the world was not as cruel and arbitrary as it seemed. They wanted to believe, and he was going to tell them the truth. "Thank you," he said. He stepped up to the podium. He looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you all for coming." He paused. He let the silence stretch. This was part of his technique. The silence made them lean forward. The silence made them pay attention. "I'm going to tell you something that will make you uncomfortable," he said. "I'm going to tell you something that will make you angry. I'm going to tell you something that will make you want to leave this auditorium and never think about me again." He paused again. He looked at the faces in the front row. A young woman with red hair and a nose ring. An older man with a gray beard and kind eyes. A teenager with braces and a look of intense concentration. "That's fine," he said. "You're free to leave. You're free to disagree. You're free to think that I'm wrong. That is the nature of philosophy. That is the nature of truth. The truth does not require your agreement. The truth simply is." He took a breath. He began. "Everything in this room," he said, "has a cost. The lights that illuminate this stage. The microphones that carry my voice. The chairs you are sitting in. The paper in your notebooks. The clothes on your backs. Everything has a cost. Everything has a consequence. Nothing is free." He looked at the audience. They were listening. They were waiting. "And yet," he said, "there is one thing that we treat as if it were free. One thing that we create without counting the cost. One thing that we bring into existence without asking permission. One thing that we impose on a being that did not ask for it, that could not ask for it, that will never be able to forgive us for the burden we have placed upon it." He paused. He let the words settle. "That thing," he said, "is life." The room was silent. He could hear the hum of the ventilation system, the faint rustle of papers, the soft breathing of the audience. He could hear the silence, and he knew that he had them. "We like to believe that life is a gift," he said. "We like to believe that existence is a blessing. We like to believe that the chance to experience the world, to feel joy and love and beauty, is worth the pain and suffering and loss that inevitably accompanies it. We like to believe this because we have no choice. We are alive. We cannot undo our existence. We must find meaning in it, or we will go mad." He walked to the edge of the stage. He looked down at the front row. The young woman with the red hair was looking up at him, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. But what if we are wrong? He said. What if life is not a gift? What if existence is not a blessing? What if the chance to experience the world is not worth the price we pay for it? What if the suffering is not a necessary evil? What if it is simply evil? He let the question hang in the air. He watched the audience process it, the doubt flicker in their eyes. There is a concept in philosophy called the asymmetry of pain, he said. It is a simple concept, and it is devastating. It goes like this. The presence of pain is bad. The absence of pain is good. The presence of pleasure is good. But the absence of pleasure is not bad, unless there is a being who exists to miss it. He paused. He let the logic sink in. Let me explain, he said. Imagine two scenarios. In the first scenario, a child is born. The child experiences a life of pain and suffering. The child dies young in agony. This is bad. We can all agree that this is bad. He looked at the audience. They were nodding. In the second scenario, he said, the child is never born. The child experiences nothing. The child does not feel pain. The child does not feel pleasure. The child simply does not exist. He paused. He looked at the faces in the audience. They were waiting. Which scenario is better? He asked. He let the question hang. He let the audience consider it. He watched them struggle with it. The second scenario is better, he said. It is clearly better. The child who is never born does not suffer. The child who is never born does not miss the pleasure it never experienced. The child who is never born is not harmed by its non-existence. He took a step back from the edge of the stage. He looked out at the audience. This is the asymmetry, he said. The presence of pain is bad. The absence of pain is good. The presence of pleasure is good. But the absence of pleasure is not bad. Not unless there is someone who exists to miss it. He paused. He let the silence stretch. This means, he said, that procreation is a gamble with the life of another, a gamble that we have no right to take. The applause was louder this time. It was the applause of an audience that had been convinced, that had been shocked out of its complacency, that had been forced to confront something it had never considered before. He let the applause wash over him. He let it fill the auditorium. He let it become part of the silence that followed. He had done it. He had made the argument. He had laid out the logic. He had shown them the truth. And now he had to show them the cost. I know what you are thinking, he said. You are thinking that this is cold, that this is heartless, that I am a monster for making this argument, that I am a sociopath for suggesting that life is not worth living. He paused. He looked at the faces in the audience. They were uncomfortable. They were squirming. They were trying to reconcile his argument with their own experience. I am not a monster, he said. I am a philosopher. I am someone who has spent his entire life trying to understand the world. And the world, I have discovered, is a place of suffering. Not just the suffering of the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized. Not just the suffering of the victims of war and famine and disease, but the suffering of everyone. The suffering that is built into the very fabric of existence. The suffering that is the price of consciousness. He paused. He looked at his notes. He did not need them. He had memorized the argument years ago, but they were a comfort, a reminder of the structure, a way to anchor himself in the face of the hostility he knew was coming. Consider the statistics, he said. Every year, millions of children die before the age of 5. Millions of people die of cancer. Millions of people die of heart disease. Millions of people die in car accidents, in workplace accidents, in accidents that are so senseless and random that we cannot even begin to comprehend them. This is the world we live in. This is the world we are creating when we bring a child into existence. He looked at the audience. They were silent. They were waiting. And consider the quality of life, he said. Even for those who survive, even for those who do not die young, life is a struggle for meaning, a struggle for purpose, a struggle to find something, anything that makes the suffering bearable. We pretend that this struggle is noble. We pretend that this struggle is meaningful, but it is not. It is simply struggle. It is simply suffering. It is simply the price we pay for the illusion of happiness. He paused. He took a sip of water. He let the audience sit with his words. I am not saying that there is no joy in life, he said. I am not saying that there are no moments of happiness. I am not saying that love is meaningless, that art is pointless, that the human spirit is not capable of greatness. I am saying that the joy, the happiness, the love, the art, the greatness, all of it is temporary. All of it is fleeting. All of it is overwhelmed in the end by the suffering that is the constant companion of existence. He looked at the audience. He saw the young woman with the red hair. She was crying. He saw the older man with the gray beard. He was shaking his head. I'm saying, Elias continued, that we have no right to impose this suffering on another being. We have no right to create a life that will be consumed by pain. We have no right to gamble with the life of another. The only ethical choice is to refrain from procreation. The only ethical choice is to prevent the existence of a being that will suffer. The only ethical choice is to give the gift of non-existence. The silence stretched. It was a heavy silence, a silence that seemed to press down on the room. It was the silence of an audience that had been forced to confront something it had never wanted to confront. It was the silence of an audience that was struggling to breathe. And then, from somewhere in the back of the room, a voice. Dr. Thorne. He looked up. The voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. It was the voice of a woman who had come to the lecture with her mind made up, who had come to hear the argument but not to accept it, who had come to challenge him. He knew that voice. He had heard it before. It was the voice of a woman who had written a book about the beauty of existence, about the miracle of consciousness, about the transcendent joy of being alive. He had read her book. He had admired it in a way, even as he disagreed with it. Dr. Thorne, she said again, you have made a compelling argument, but you have left something out. He nodded. He had expected this. He had expected the challenge. He had prepared for it. He had prepared for the objections, the counter-arguments, the accusations. He had prepared for all of it. What have I left out? He asked. Joy, she said. You have left out joy. He looked at her. She was standing near the back of the auditorium, her arms crossed over her chest, her face calm and composed. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, and a voice that carried the weight of decades of experience. You have argued that life is suffering, she said. And you are right. Life is suffering. There's no doubt about that. But life is also joy. Life is also love. Life is also beauty. Life is also the chance to experience something that is greater than ourselves, something that transcends the pain and the suffering and the loss. Life is the chance to be part of something larger than ourselves. She paused. She looked at him. Her eyes were kind. Her eyes were sad. Her eyes were full of the certainty of her belief. You have argued that the absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is a being who exists to miss it, she said. And that is true. But the presence of pleasure is also good. The presence of joy is also good. The presence of love is also good. And by refusing to create life, by refusing to bring a being into existence that could experience these things, you are not just preventing suffering. You are also preventing joy. She paused. She let the words settle. She looked at him with her kind, sad eyes. You are preventing joy, she said. And that is a moral wrong. He nodded. He had heard this argument before. He had heard it 100 times. He had heard it from his colleagues, from his students, from the journalists who interviewed him. He had heard it from his sister when she had told him he was a monster. Joy is temporary, he said. Joy is fleeting. Joy is a fleeting illusion that is inevitably consumed by the suffering that is the constant companion of existence. And what is the cost of that joy? What is the price we pay for those moments of happiness? He paused. He looked at the woman in the back of the room. He looked at her kind eyes, her sad eyes, her eyes that were full of the certainty of her belief. The cost is the suffering, he said. The cost is the pain. The cost is the loss. The cost is the certainty of death, and the joy, the fleeting moments of happiness, are not worth the price. He paused. He let the silence stretch. Preventing joy is not a moral wrong, he said. Preventing suffering is a moral right. The debate went on for another hour. He answered questions. He responded to objections. He defended his argument against every attack. He was good at this. He had been doing it for years. But when the lecture was over, when the audience had filed out, when the stage lights had dimmed and the silence had returned, he stood alone in the empty auditorium and felt something he had not expected. He felt doubt. He had made the argument. He had made it with passion and precision, with clarity and conviction. He had made it better than he had ever made it before. But he had not convinced himself. The woman's voice echoed in his head. You are preventing joy. That is a moral wrong. He had answered her. He had answered her with logic and reason. He had answered her with the asymmetry of pain. He had answered her with the certainty of suffering. But he had not answered her with his heart. He stood in the empty auditorium, listening to the hum of the ventilation system, and he thought about the joy he had felt in his life, the moments of happiness that had broken through the gray fog of his existence, the love he had felt for his sister, the love he had felt for his grandmother, the love he had felt briefly for a woman he had met in graduate school, a woman with dark hair and bright eyes, and a laugh that had made him feel for a moment that the world was not so bad after all. He had lost her. He had pushed her away. He had told her that love was an illusion, that attachment was a trap, that the only honest response to the human condition was to turn away. He had told her this, and she had believed him, and she had left, and he had never seen her again. He had been right. He knew he had been right. Love was an illusion. Attachment was a trap. The only honest response was to turn away. But he had been lonely. He had been so lonely, and the loneliness had been worse than the suffering, worse than the pain, worse than the certainty of death. He stood in the empty auditorium, and he thought about the woman with the dark hair and the bright eyes. He thought about the joy he had felt when he was with her. He thought about the love he had felt for her. He thought about the loss he had felt when she left. He thought about the loss, and he thought about the joy, and he thought about the asymmetry of pain. The presence of pain is bad. The absence of pain is good. The presence of pleasure is good. The absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is a being who exists to miss it. He had been right. He had been right about all of it, but he had missed the joy. He had missed the joy so much. He walked off the stage and down the corridor. He walked out of the auditorium and into the cold night air. He stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the stars. The city was quiet. The streets were empty. The world was asleep. He had made the argument. He had made it with passion and precision. He had made it with clarity and conviction. But he had not convinced himself. The lecture was published in a journal, reprinted in a book and translated into 14 languages. It made him famous and infamous. It made him the face of a movement that he had never intended to lead. He received letters, thousands of them. They came from all over the world. They came from people who had read his work and found in it a solace they could not find elsewhere. They came from people who had been convinced by his argument, who had decided not to have children, who had found peace in the acceptance of non-existence. They came from people who thanked him. They came from people who hated him. They came from people who wanted to debate him, to challenge him, to prove him wrong. He answered some of them. He ignored the rest. He was busy. He was famous. He was the most hated philosopher in the world.